Welcome back, everyone. It is super good to see you all. This is a video that is long overdue. A bunch of people have asked for help with this. And the reason that it is so long overdue is because it's daunting. It's a lot of information to cover, and there's a lot of things going on. Let's talk about food for outdoor adventures. Let's go. Okay, let's get rolling on this because there's a lot to cover. I'm going to start off by saying that there are 3 ways that you can do food for outdoor adventures. There are probably more than 3, but the way that I think of it is there are 3 ways. I will also add I don't dry my own foods. I don't make pemmican or anything like that. That stuff is a job unto itself. I'm super envious of the people who have the time to start dehydrating tomato sauce 6 months before their trip. I don't. And I bet most of my viewers don't either. This is relatively simple, easy in terms of management, and then some variation. So it's the 3 ways. The first way, probably a very popular way, is freeze-dried food. I use freeze-dried food when I'm backpacking. I actually use the second option that I'm going to talk about in a second, but freeze-dried food is great. It is a little expensive. It is a little high in sodium, but it's super convenient. It trickles down so that you need less gear. You really just need to boil water in a long-handled spork to eat your meals. Works super well. It's really good for 2-day trips, for weekend trips, 2-3 days. It works really well for that. Packs really light, so it's great in a backpack. I will sometimes throw a freeze-dried meal or 2 in when I'm kayaking, when I have plenty of space and weight, for nights that I just don't feel like cooking. Planning meals with freeze-dried is super easy. A breakfast, a lunch, a dinner. I'm going to add an asterisk to lunch and we'll come back to it. Super easy, super convenient. Option 2, freeze-dried food with addition. Freeze-dried meal for breakfast, freeze-dried meal for dinner, and then real food or real snack food for lunch. I'm going to give you a quote from Paul Petzold, the founder of Knowles. Paul said that lunch is the meal that starts right after breakfast and finishes just before dinner, which is essentially saying fuel yourself all day long. And that's what snack foods are good for. This is actually the way that I do freeze-drieds, is I'll do freeze-dried for breakfast and for dinner, and then snack food, be it jerky or cheese or tuna in a packet or candy, whatever gets you through the day, trail mix, whatever gets you through the day, just to sort of keep those calories flowing. And I think that actually works really well. That's how I use it. And I don't generally do that kayaking just because I prefer to cook my meals kayaking. It's a good alternative. And I'm not going to give you real specifics on the filler stuff, the in-between, because there's so much variation as to what different people like and what different people tolerate. You'll see in a little bit the sort of stuff that's on my list, but I don't want to get into specifics as you should be eating this food. Eat what works well for you and your body and what goes down well and keeps you fired up. I will say another thing to think about in terms of freeze-dried foods is don't feel like you have to stop at adding boiling water. I will frequently pack in a spice kit when I do freeze-dried food and spice things up. Sometimes spicing them up, making them hotter, spicier, I tend to like. Sometimes it's hey, this could use some garlic powder. This could use a little more tomato or tomato paste. I'll also frequently pack in tortillas or pitas or something like that to go with. I think that works really well. You can make those freeze-dried meals much better. I will also say, about every 10 years or so, there is a revolution in freeze-dried food, and I have seen in big groups like that of years, you see huge improvements in the quality of freeze-dried food. I will also tell you a pet peeve of mine, which is people referring to freeze-dried food as MREs, which they are not. MREs is meals ready to eat. They do not require heating or boiling water or something like that. MRE is a military term. People used to come into REI when I worked there and say, hey, where are MREs? And we don't sell MREs. We sell freeze-dried food. And they're like, oh, that's what I meant. That's a Brett peeve in terms of that is not an MRE. An MRE is a specific thing. I digress. So that's option 1, That's option 2. Here is what's really going to take the time, which is option 3. Option 3, I will tell you that option 3 I learned from being a student and then an instructor at Knowles, which is essentially the pantry method. And the pantry method is you don't necessarily plan meals, you just pack ingredients, and then every day you sort of look in your pantry and like, oh, I've got this and I've got this and I've got this, and let's make this tonight. So I'll do that to this day, although I will be like, oh, I definitely want to cook this, I definitely want to cook this, I definitely want to cook this. So I'll make sure I have the ingredients for that. But for a 30-day trip, you can't really do that. And I should say that individual meals, freeze-dried meals, things like that work great on short trips, and that's your meal planning. But it's really hard and really expensive to do that for a 30-day or for a 2-week trip. Meal planning, individual freeze-dried meals for 2 weeks is a nightmare, and you always end up eating the same thing 6 times 3, right? And so the pantry method for that works really well. So pantry method I learned from Knowles. Knowles is famous for it. Knowles is also where I got the idea for the small plastic bags that I use. I've done a couple of videos about those. Those are the way to pack food in the backcountry. You can get a lot of information from the Knowles Cookery. This is a very beaten up version of the Knowles Cookery. Knowles does a great job of breaking it down into this much protein and this much carbs and this much sugar. And you'll see in a minute the way that I break it down. It's a little bit less rigid, a little bit more freeform. I got serious about this when I did the Inside Passage. I was already a Knowles instructor, and I was like, I need to do a 30-day meal plan. And I came up with the idea of emailing someone at Knowles and saying they have Excel spreadsheet that they put some information in, and then it spits out everything that needs to be packed for a course. So that's, 30-day courses with 15 students and 3 instructors. And so what I decided I was going to do was, for the Inside Passage, I emailed someone at the Knowles Rocky Mountain branch in their rations department. It was like, hey, I'm doing this trip. I'm an instructor. I'm doing this trip. Could you put my info in on the sheet and then just email me the sheet? And they were like, absolutely, not a problem. And so they sent me that. And honestly, I've been working off of that same sheet for big trips since 2010 when I emailed them, until I got to the point where it was like, this is like not right for me anymore. It's almost too detailed. Let me recreate my own sheet, which I'm going to show you in a minute. For a trip like that, I had 3 10-day rations. So 30 days of food, 3 dry bags, each with 10 days of rations. And then I had another bag with what are called freshies. So that's fresh vegetables, things that pack well. Think onions pack well, cabbage packs well, carrots, potatoes. It's really nice to get those sort of fresh vegetables and fruits, I should say. Apples pack well, lemons pack well, oranges pack okay. All of those things will survive in a dry bag. You can do this backpacking, but your pack is going to be significantly heavier, which you'll see momentarily. Knowles put all that information in, sent it to me, and then I was able to print that out and take that food shopping. And then this is another thing to think about, is that when you start food shopping for a trip, you need to sort of think differently. I like to just sort of walk around my supermarket with a cup of coffee, looking for products that would be super easy and convenient for the backcountry. So it's things like, there's a tortellini that I use that is shelf stable and doesn't need to be rehydrated. There is shelf stable bacon if you eat meat. There's all sorts of stuff like noodles in a bag, ramen, things like that. There's 8 million things. There's a hash brown that I use that is easily rehydrated and cooks up really well. I will also use some powdered things. I will pack in powdered milk and powdered eggs. The Ova Easy eggs, OVA, I'm super impressed with. When scrambled, unbelievable in terms of looks like scrambled eggs. And I'll use those to make like breakfast burritos or breakfast quesadillas or something like that. Big fan of that stuff. Works really well. Let me pull up the sheet that I work from, and we'll start talking about how to plan multi-day with real food. Okay. This is the sheet that I created, and it's relatively straightforward. It is much more easy to manage than the Knowles sheet, which was very confusing and I couldn't get a handle on it. You start, essentially, there are instructions on the bottom left corner. First thing you do is in the upper left-hand corner, you enter the number of people in your trip. At the moment, I have it set to 2, the number of days of the trip, which is for this 7, and then your food weight, and that is pounds of food per person per day. And there is a range, and that comes from Knowles, of 1.75 to 2.5 pounds of food per person per day. And it breaks down to essentially 1.75 pounds is around 3,000 calories a day, 2 pounds is around 3,500, 2.5 pounds is around 4,000 calories a day. There is a tremendous amount of variation here. Input those numbers, and that will give you your goal weight in the lower left in pounds. I then have this broken up into categories: breakfast foods, central pantry, trail snacks, carbs, cheese meat, freshies. Freshies, again, is fresh fruits and vegetables. Cheese meat, you could also just think of as proteins. Carbs is just that: pastas, couscous, refried beans, dried, rice, lentils. I included ramen packets and tortillas in this. Trail/snacks. Remember what Paul Petzold said: lunch is the meal that starts right after breakfast and ends just before dinner. This is all of those things. And so a big list of things in here: pretzels and trail mix and chocolate and hard candy and hot drink mixes and cold drink mixes and whatever you like on the trail. Central pantry is stuff that doesn't really fit anyplace else. It's things like tomato paste, peanut butter, milk powder, brown sugar. Brown sugar is great because it packs really well and can be used if you do baking in the backcountry. You can use it in baking, but you can also use it like in your coffee. Bouillon, maple syrup, dried fruit, oil, things that can be used in a lot of categories to sort of complete a recipe. And then breakfast foods: oatmeal pancake mix, hash browns, egg mix. And then to the right of whatever it is that you're entering, you put in the weight in ounces. And then the columns total the weight in ounces for each category, and then total the weight in ounces for everything, and then converts the total weight in ounces to pounds. And then further breaks it down so you can see percentages. What percentage of your food is cheese and meat? What percentage of your packed food is trail snacks? Things like that. In general, 20% of your diet should be protein, 50% should be carbs. Also keep in mind that many food types cover many different categories, so there's crossover. Peanut butter is both a carb and a protein. And I will also say a lot of the information for this not only comes from the Knowles Cookery, which is a great book. A lot of this is covered in my book, Go. And in this book, I worked with a great nutritionist to try and make this simple. Turns out it's not simple. This gives you a way to weigh your food as you're packaging it, enter it into this sheet, and then you can see where you are weight-wise. And so frequently I will just, if like I'm doing a 3-day trip and I don't want to go through this process, I'll package up all the food I want, figure out where I am weight-wise, weigh it, and then come back to this and just enter in the tally, the number of people, the number of days, the food weight per person per day, to see if I'm coming up in the right place. Freshies, I don't include in the overall weights. It's included in here if you want it, but you don't have to include the weights there. I generally just figure out my meals and then get the freshies that I want. So in order to do this well, you need, besides a sheet like this, you need bags to put things in. I know a lot of people use Ziplocs, but please don't use Ziplocs. You need a kitchen scale to weigh the individual foods. And if your kitchen scale won't do, say, 20 pounds, then you need another scale to weigh everything. That can just be like a people scale, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this available on Ko-fi. You can buy this where you buy all my other stuff. I put in each of the columns things that I use. I did add some things that I don't use because I know people do. You can just add whatever you want or change what I've put in there. Once you've got it, you can tweak this however you want. But it gives you the ability to be like, oh, I don't pack in tuna, but I do pack in steaks. Or I don't pack in M&Ms, but I do pack in gummy worms, right? Whatever. You can make these be whatever you want. The weight in ounces column will always tabulate it down correctly. So on Ko-fi, there will be 2 different options for download. There will be a Windows version in Excel. There will be a Mac version in Numbers. I originally created this in Numbers, but I've checked it a bunch of places on different Windows machines, and it seems to work. If you have issues, let me know. We'll figure it out. Once I've got all the tabulations done on this list, I then take the small bags of food that I've created, and those go in dry bags. I can generally get 10 days of food in a 13-liter dry bag. Sometimes the freshies will be separate, and that can work up to 10 days in a backpack. 10 days of food is generally about 20 pounds, so your pack is going to be pretty heavy. This works really well for kayaking, where I don't care how much anything weighs. And I stick by that 13 liters for 10 days, up to 30 days. So I've got 3 13-liter bags, which will be enough food for 30 days. And that stuff will fit in my Delta or most touring kayaks without a problem. Remember to keep it balanced. Cool. So that's how I handle foods for weekends, freeze-dried. Slightly longer than weekends, so freeze-dried with supplements, option 2. And then option 3, the pantry method. Again, I'm going to plug both my book as well as the Knowles Cookery. And the funny thing is that when I emailed off to Knowles, I ended up chatting with Claudia Pearson, who I did not realize at the time wrote the cookery. She was super nice to help me out with this a million years ago. And really, it was skills that I took from there that I then created this form, is based on their systems. I just sort of made it a little bit easier and a little bit more Brett. If you found this helpful, and I hope it was, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you outside.
Ooh, that's a good.
And here's what it can look like before you
Good
bake.
idea. The mock
Side by
roll.
side.
On the
Yeah, that'd be good.